there could be a last-minute snag. We'll bring you the latest. As the national debt crashes through the $22 trillion ceiling, we look at what ripple effects could do to the U.S. economy. And as Venezuela endures a political, economic, and humanitarian crisis, we'll get perspective from the president of the next-door neighbor, Colombia, who met with President Trump today. This is Special Report. Good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Bret Baier. We begin tonight with what we know about the compromise budget bill and what we don't know. We know that supporters from both parties are trying to move legislation through the proper channels as quickly as possible, with the Friday midnight deadline looming. We know President Trump is unhappy with this bill, but hasn't seen the written legislation yet because it's not done yet. What we still do not know is if the president will hold his nose and sign it or force another partial government shutdown. We have Fox team coverage tonight. Mike Emanuel on Capitol Hill tells us where the measure stands right now. But we start off with Chief White House correspondent John Roberts and what he's hearing about which direction the president may be leaning. Good evening, John.
And the bottom line, we do not know yet at this point. With just a little more than 48 hours to go until another government shutdown, the White House is cautioning against a rush to pass what it calls complex legislation, insisting President Trump will not sign something he hasn't fully looked at. White House officials tell Fox News President Trump has not yet made a decision whether he will sign the bill emerging in Congress and will not make that decision until the White House has had a chance to fully review it.
Well, we haven't gotten it yet. We'll be getting it. We'll be looking for landmines because you could have that. You know, it's been known to happen before to people.
Going through the hundreds of pages of the bill will take time. Today, President Trump's allies in the House Freedom Caucus introduced a temporary spending measure that would keep government funded for another week, giving everyone time to fully vet the legislation.
It allows us to continue to negotiate and get a better deal for building the border security wall.
White House officials say the president is not happy with several measures in the bill. First among them, the amount of money for a border wall, though President Trump insists he has ways around funding limitations.
With the wall, they want to be stingy, but we have options that most people don't really understand.
The president can use transfer authority to move funds between departments to add money to wall construction. But any attempt to do that would likely be met with howls of protest from Democrats on Capitol Hill. However, a new Fox News poll finds support for building a border wall increasing. Now 46% of registered voters say they favor a wall, up 3 points from last month. Speaking to sheriffs and chiefs of police this afternoon, President Trump pledged to make good on his central campaign promise.
We will get the job done. The wall is very, very on its way. It's happening.
Meeting with the president of Colombia, Ivan Duque, today, President Trump stressed the need for a wall to stop cross-border drug traffic and pledged to work with Duque to eradicate narco-trafficking in Colombia.
Yeah, we are working together so that Colombia eradicates some of what they're growing in Colombia.
The task that we have before us, to fight drugs, to fight terrorism, to promote economic growth, and obviously to strengthen trade.
The two leaders are also working together to put pressure on Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro to step down.
We're working together. Our militaries are very focused and working together. And let's see how it all turns out. We're going to make things turn out well.
On the border security bill, a couple of items that the president takes issue with, a provision that would allow local authorities and some groups, including a butterfly center, to veto where parts of the wall are built, as well an add-on provision that would provide back pay for furloughed federal contractors, not employees, but contractors who are out of work during the government shutdown. Brett?
John Roberts live in the North Lawn. John, thanks. Let's get an update tonight on the timeline for action or possible action on the budget bill. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live on Capitol Hill right now. Good evening, Mike.
Brett, good evening to you. Like the rest of us, lawmakers are waiting to hear if President Trump will sign the bipartisan border security package. They are proceeding, expecting it to pass both the House and the Senate with strong bipartisan support.
Support the bill for what is in it. Don't judge it for what is not in it. We have other days to pass other legislation.
conferees have indicated that they pretty much reached agreement. Obviously, they're working on this, and we hope to have the papers done, ready to go by tomorrow, and we hope to pass it by tomorrow night.
A new Fox poll reveals 66% of Americans favor a budget deal that includes funding for some form of a border barrier, plus other security measures and humanitarian relief. Allies of President Trump say he does not need to settle for just the $1.375 billion in this border security deal. Many here expect the president will likely take executive action right after signing the bill to move money around.
The president still has an option to put more money in. The question that you'll look at, does he have the ability to build the barriers in the areas the experts requested? I believe that will be the case.
Most sources do not expect the president to declare a national emergency, recognizing that could get tied up in the courts.
The national emergency declaration is definitely on the table, but as to signing this bill, you got to, one, look at it before you can sign it. But generally speaking, if you can use the money the way he envisions for barriers, and there is no limit on bed space in reality, I think he'd be inclined to take the deal and move on.
There are clearly grumbles from conservatives who don't love this bipartisan package, but Democrats are the majority in the House, and I'm told their side feels confident it will pass. The big game changer, of course, would be if the president were to come out against it. Brett?
Mike Emanuel live on the Hill. Mike, thanks. FEMA Administrator Brock Long is stepping down. This comes months after an investigation found he misused government vehicles to travel to his home in North Carolina. Long agreed to reimburse the government. He says in a letter to the agency employees he's resigning to spend more time with his family. Several Democratic senators are urging President Trump to insist China address the issues of technology and intellectual property theft in any new trade deal. U.S. negotiators are in Beijing this week to discuss a trade pact to avert an increase on U.S. tariffs for Chinese goods scheduled for March 2nd. Today, President Trump said those talks are going, quote, very well. Stocks were up on that news. The Dow gained 117.5. The S&P 500 finished ahead 8. The Nasdaq was up 6. While the markets have not been adversely affected this week by news the national debt has surpassed the $22 trillion mark with a T, many economists believe the long-term implications are troubling. Tonight, correspondent Doug McKelway takes a look at the numbers and what they could mean.
The debt clock is spinning like a slot machine that hit the jackpot. Only in reverse. It reached a new milestone this week when the public debt surpassed $22 trillion. Where it stops, nobody knows.
It's mounting faster than the economy is growing. It's going to have to be dealt with at some point.
Beholden to pleasing their respective bases, few politicians are willing to address the hard choices that debt reduction would entail. Higher taxes and less spending.
We should close those tax loopholes designed by and for the wealthy and bring down our debt.
While President Trump has criticized the increasing debt under his predecessor, his $1.5 trillion tax cut and military spending have also contributed to the rising debt.
Our military, which desperately needed funding, we went $700 billion, is more powerful than ever before.
Politicians on the left are proposing massive new programs without any realistic plans for how to pay for them. Politicians on the right talk about fiscal responsibility, but what do? They give a corporate tax cut.
Adding to the problem, the debt ceiling. Lawmakers routinely raise it, a short-term fix that exacerbates the long-term problem. Another issue, demographics. Aging baby boomers eating up entitlements with too few young people to pay for them. If interest rates rise rapidly, you've got real problems.
The worst-case scenario is something that looks like a Greece or Portugal sovereign meltdown. Taxes have to be raised, programs have to be slashed, and the population suffers terribly.
If the Fed raises interest rates, it will show up not just in public debt, but in personal debt too, in credit card, mortgage, and car loan rates. Yet a new Fox poll today finds 63% of Americans are optimistic about the economy. Brett?
Doug, thank you. Senate Republicans are hoping to put Democrats in general and presidential candidates in particular in a tough political spot very soon. It concerns their support for a new energy and economic plan that many people consider both a fantasy and a danger. Just a plan now. Correspondent Peter Ducey is on Capitol Hill tonight.
Mitch McConnell has heard enough talk about the Green New Deal in the Senate. Now he's ready for a vote.
We'll give everybody an opportunity to go on record and see how they feel about the Green New Deal.
4 of the resolution's co-sponsors in the Senate are running for president, including Kamala Harris.
Mitch McConnell bringing the Green New Deal up for a vote. Do you support that? All right.
I support the Green New Deal.
But another co-sponsor / candidate, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, thinks the majority leader is trying to pull a fast one.
I think this is an opportunity for us to talk about a vision for this country that is exciting. And so if we have a vote, we have a vote, and we can be what we're for. But I think the vote being called today is just a political stunt.
One of the resolution's authors suggests the resolution isn't ready or popular enough yet. Senator Ed Markey tweeted, "Don't let Mitch McConnell fool you. This is nothing but an attempt to sabotage the movement we are building. He wants to silence your voice so Republicans don't have to explain why they are climate change deniers. McConnell wants this to be the end. This is just the beginning." Republican critics of the Green New Deal regularly refer to a fact sheet its supporters put out then retracted, suggesting the future would be better if air travel was replaced by high-speed rail, something California just learned isn't easy, canceling an over-budget route from Los Angeles to San Francisco.
The current project, as planned, would cost too much and respectfully take too long.
The Green New Deal also seeks to eliminate flatulent cows, something Iowa's senator has beef with.
A lot of people in this country, mostly city slickers, that think food grows in supermarkets and not on farms. I think it's very unrealistic.
So Republicans are trying to put presidential candidates' environmental rhetoric on the record as the primary field takes shape. And that is why sources are telling Fox tonight this vote on a plan to dramatically reshape society to combat climate change could happen very soon after next week's congressional recess. Brett?
Peter Doocy live on the Hill. Peter, thanks. Boston's top prosecutor is offering to investigate allegations Virginia Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax sexually assaulted a woman if she files a criminal complaint. Suffolk County District Attorney Rachel Rollins says she would provide a safe and supportive environment for Vanessa Tyson if she wants to discuss the matter with law enforcement. Tyson says Fairfax assaulted her at the Democratic National Convention in Boston in 2004. He denies it. Up next, the Trump administration's perspective on the multi-tiered crisis in Venezuela, followed by a live interview with neighboring Colombia's president. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 35 in Orlando, as Florida's state attorney says no club goers were hit by responding officers' bullets during the siege at the Pulse nightclub in 2016. Officers fired more than 180 shots during a 3-hour standoff with gunman Omar Mateen, who killed 49 people. Fox 31 in Denver with more negotiations aimed at ending the strike by public school teachers now in its 3rd day. Educators want changes in the district's pay system to more closely resemble those in other districts that make it easier for teachers to advance in pay. And this is a live look at Miami from our affiliate WSVN. One of the big stories there tonight, a monkey believed to have been stolen from the Palm Beach Zoo has been found safe. Detectives brought the rare 12-year-old animal back to the zoo just before midnight. Zoo president says Callie appears to be in good condition. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back. The president's point man on the Venezuela crisis says international pressure will eventually lead to the ouster of disputed President Nicolas Maduro. Special Representative Elliott Abrams was on Capitol Hill today. At least one lawmaker seemed more interested in the past than the present. State Department correspondent Rich Edson has the latest.
If I can respond to that.
It wasn't a question. That was not a question.
The Trump administration's new Venezuela envoy defending his work in the Reagan administration. One of the newest members of the House Foreign Affairs Committee questioned Elliott Abrams' credibility on Latin American policy because of U.S. involvement then in El Salvador's civil war.
Yes or no, do you think that massacre was a fabulous achievement? that happened under our watch?
That is a ridiculous question, and I
yes or no?
No.
I will take that as a yes.
I am not going to respond to that kind of personal attack.
As Abrams defends the current administration's Latin American policy, disputed Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro refuses to yield power to opposition leader and interim President Juan Guaido.
There is a storm brewing inside the Maduro regime that will eventually bring it to an end. For those remaining supporters of the regime, we have one simple message. Your time is up.
Much of Venezuela's military leadership appears to support Maduro. Abrams says now is the time for the armed forces to support the Venezuelan people. 2 weeks after National Security Advisor John Bolton appeared at a briefing with 5,000 troops to Colombia, clearly written on a notepad, Abrams says the administration is not taking the military route. Meeting this afternoon with Colombian President Ivan Duque, President Trump refused to elaborate.
I never talk about that.
Are you sending 5,000 troops to Colombia?
You'll see.
The United States has sent food and medicine to Colombia. The United Nations says more than 3 million Venezuelans have fled during this economic crisis. Many arrive here in neighboring Cúcuta, Colombia. In August, Fox News traveled to Cúcuta, where tens of thousands of Venezuelans cross daily into Colombia to secure medicine, clean water, and food. Maduro's government is blocking American aid shipments there, claiming his country is not a nation of beggars. Opposition leader Juan Guaido says he is organizing aid caravans into Venezuela starting February 23rd. That gives the military more than a week to decide whether to try and stop them. Colombian President Ivan Duque has committed to ensuring that those caravans arrive. Brent?
Rich Edson, live at the State Department. Rich, thanks. Let's talk about the situation tonight with Colombian President Ivan Duque Marquez. Mr. President, thanks for the time.
Thank you so much, Brent. It's a great pleasure to be here in your program.
You had this meeting today in the Oval Office with the President. How would you describe that meeting? What was the focus?
I think it was a great meeting because, first of all, in Colombia, we have received a strong support from the U.S. administration in our fight against terrorism, in our fight against drugs. But at the same time, we have been developing a very broad commercial and trade agenda, investment agenda. So I think that was very important to strengthen the ties between our nations. But also, we talked about the situation in Venezuela, and we share the commitment that the dictatorship in Venezuela must come to an end, and that there has to be an opportunity for the Venezuelan people to rebuild their institutions.
From your discussions, what is the best way, do you think, for the disputed President Maduro to leave?
Well, the first thing, Brett, is that what we have seen in the last month and a half is really unprecedented. We have built a diplomatic blockade that has put the regime under pressure. Most of the countries in the Western Hemisphere have supported President Guaido, now the European Union, and this has isolated Maduro. And now you're seeing members of the military playing loyalty to Juan Guaido, and I think this is going to generate a domino effect. For me, this is the end. Now, whether it's going to take 1 month or more, I don't know. But the message is clear. Maduro has to step out, and the whole international community is sending a strong message.
It does not sound from Maduro that he plans to go anywhere. He's talking here to the BBC about the U.S. Take a listen.
They hate us and belittle us because they only believe in their own interests and in the interests of the United States. So in this battle that we are fighting for Venezuela, I am telling you it is a battle that goes further than our country. I call upon the people of the world to wake up. Open your eyes to see that it is an aggression against a peaceful country.
So could Maduro be president or disputed president of Venezuela 1 year from now?
Well, the first thing is that the message he has gotten from the international community is that he doesn't have any legitimacy. The National Assembly is the only legitimate democratic power in Venezuela, and Juan Guaido is the only legitimate president of Venezuela. Now, Juan Guaido needs to lead the transformation of all the institutions and the recovery to democracy. The steps that we expect to happen in the next weeks is, first of all, the humanitarian aid needs to get in Venezuela. The message that Juan Guaido sent today, that he wants to have the caravans on the 23rd, well, we're going to support that. But also, I think that looking at members of the military, that are not playing any more loyalty to Maduro, and now they're committing to supporting Guaido, is going to generate a domino effect.
Have you seen defections from Venezuela's military into Colombia?
We have seen a recent defection. One of the most significant strategists in the Air Force left Venezuela, and he's now playing loyalty to Juan Guaido. I think that was a very
2,000, right, Mr. President? 2,000 Venezuelan generals, and is there a concern that not more of them are defecting?
I believe that this is going to happen, as I said, in a domino effect. But I must also say something, Brett. When you're seeing the people in the streets of Venezuela supporting the assembly, supporting Guaido, people are claiming for humanitarian aid. And let me be honest, what we see in Venezuela is the worst humanitarian crisis in Latin America's recent history. We have seen people leaving Venezuela. We have 1.2 million Venezuelans in Colombia that have gone to our country because they have hunger, they have frozen bones, they're just waiting to a new opportunity. I believe that now, with this diplomatic blockade, now with the people in Venezuela calling for the regime to end, and now seeing all the defections in the military, this is the most important signal that this time is different.
You know, Maduro said that he said in another interview, if the American empire dares to touch even one palm leaf in our territory, this will turn into a new Vietnam. Did you talk about U.S. military action?
What I've said always publicly, Brett, is that Maduro has always tried to use the threat of military intervention to try to get legitimacy. I think what has been different in this case from other experiences in Latin America is that the diplomatic blockade has been so strong and with such a determination that he's completely isolated. Now, do you need a military intervention in this case? I think now, with all the international support President Guaido has, the military of Venezuela are going to start generating more defections, and that is just going to be the end of the Maduro
matter of time. You know, Rich mentioned it in his piece, but the National Security Advisor John Bolton had this pad, and I'm sure you're aware of it, at a briefing in which it said on there 5,000 U.S. troops to Colombia. So have you seen any additional U.S. troops? Have they been requested or sent to your country?
No, we have not received 5,000 troops. I mean, I'm not good at reading notepads, and I said yesterday, said today to John Bolton. But what I think more than what the notepad said is that the whole world needs to be united to call for the end of the dictatorship in Venezuela.
So is it possible he could get exile or amnesty or some kind of for Maduro to get out of there?
I don't know if amnesty it's a solution, because at the end he has been an international criminal. Yeah. I personally denounce him at the International Criminal Court, and I think he has to respond for the systematic crimes he has committed in Venezuela. Now, is he going to leave to another country? Maybe yes. That's the path many dictators have faced in different circumstances in history, and maybe that's going to be the fate of Maduro. But most importantly, that where he goes to, the most important thing is that Venezuela needs to have a rebirth of its democratic institutions, and I am positive and optimistic that Juan Guaido is the leader to make that change.
And are you really worried about a civil war in Venezuela?
I don't see the risk of a civil war, because there's one simple thing, Brad, to tell. People are tired of the dictatorship. People have lost everything they had. Venezuela needs a reconstruction, and the reconstruction is the best path for all the citizens. Who represents that path to change is Juan Guaido. So I think he has the stamina, he has the character, he has the vision, and he has the capacity to lead the country into this transformation.
I want to ask you two more things. Obviously, right now, a lot of focus here on Capitol Hill about President's effort on a wall on the southern border. Your thoughts about that and how to reduce the migration from Central America through Mexico into the U.S., which obviously President Trump sees as a big concern.
I've always said that if you want to control migration in Central America, there has to be more capacity building in terms of entrepreneurship and the capacity to generate formal jobs. Now, what that implies is that there has to be more investment. I can tell you, for example, from the standpoint of Colombia, Colombia is the second source of foreign direct investment in some of the countries in Central America. The U.S. is number one. What needs to be done is that we have more possibilities to have more investment and to make those countries more integrated into trade within the whole region or the whole hemisphere. That could be a way to prevent those migrations. And definitely, I'm not
You're
going
okay with the wall?
I'm not going to get into domestic politics because, this is an issue that has to be discussed within Capitol Hill, and the White House is leading the debate. So I'm not going to get into the domestic debate. But what I think is that all of the countries need to work on comprehensive migration policies.
Last thing, the President mentioned it, the level of coca production in your country. Has it fallen, and is it with U.S. help?
I had a great challenge, Brett. When I took office, I said to the Colombian people that in the last 5 years, there was an exponential growth. The coca crops passed from 60,000 hectares to more than 180,000. So from the first day, I decided that we have to put an end to that exponential growth and that we have to eradicate. We eradicated, during my first 4 months in the administration, 60,000 hectares. We need to do more? Yes, we do, because we need to have, first, a containment of that exponential growth, and my goal is to have a reduction of more than 50 or 60% by the end of my administration.
Mr. President, we appreciate your time. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you so much, Brett. It has been a great pleasure.
Safe travels. When we come back, a major intelligence hit for the U.S. thanks to an accused traitor helping Iran. A former U.S. Air Force counterintelligence agent is being charged with revealing classified information to Iran. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is here with specifics. Good evening, Catherine.
Thank you, Brennan. Good evening. The 27-page indictment accuses 39-year-old Monica Witt of El Paso, Texas, of sharing a Defense Department special access program with Iran. These programs are among the most highly classified and closely held. After more than a decade working sensitive intelligence cases and protecting government secrets, Witt is accused of defecting and then working with Iranian intelligence to identify and target her former intelligence colleagues. Charges were also made public this morning against 4 Iranian operatives who stand accused of supporting Witt in operations to hack U.S. intelligence agents, steal their identities, as well as online harassment. The indictment states, quote, Witt conducted multiple Facebook searches for U.S. government agents using Facebook accounts registered to various fictitious individuals. Witt created target packages for use by Iran against U.S. government agents. In conjunction with today's indictment, the Treasury Department imposed sanctions on an Iranian group called New Horizon that ran conferences where Witt was recruited. Federal officials said today the Witt case is especially egregious.
It's a sad day whenever anyone betrays their country, especially someone who's sworn to protect it and defend it.
She specifically gave information about her colleagues, her former colleagues in the Air Force, regarding their identity. Some of those employees actually worked in a covered capacity.
All of the suspects are believed to be in Iran. Justice Department officials also said today Witt was driven by ideology and not financial gain. Brett.
Captain, thank you. NASA's longest-running rover on Mars has been pronounced dead, officially. Opportunity has been on the Red Planet for 15 years now. The 6-wheeled vehicle was built to operate just 3 months. But it kept going and going and going until it was finally doomed by a ferocious dust storm 8 months ago. Up next, the panel on whether the president will sign a budget deal or possibly force another partial government shutdown over border security.
The president must not repeat his mistakes of the recent past. President Trump, sign this bill.
If the text of the bill reflects the principles agreed to on Monday, it won't be a perfect deal, but it'll be a good deal.
That's a win for the American people. It's a compromise, and that's what appropriators do.
I would encourage the president to look at a continuing resolution and would help him to do that.
We haven't gotten it yet. We'll be getting it. We'll be looking for landmines. I don't want to see a shutdown. Shutdown would be a terrible thing.
Well, the question is, what happens? It's in this legislation is being put together. It hasn't really been formed yet up on Capitol Hill. All kinds of talks of what is happening behind the scenes. One of them deals with the just completed drug trial of El Chapo. Take a listen.
What the El Chapo Act does is real simple. It takes the money, the billions that El Chapo made crossing the border illegally, and it takes that $14 billion and it uses it to pay for the wall.